Amphibia has now ended, and I am now far enough away from the initial rush and wave of impressions and emotions that swept over me when I first watched the finale to be able to evaluate it on a more neutral footing. Now, of course, there is no such thing as objective criticism, and anyone who tells you otherwise is quite frankly a charlatan. You cannot just close your eyes and reason to discover whether a work is good or not. That's ludicrous. There are many different standards for what good art is. There are many different philosophies and ideologies and perspectives on what forms of art work and what really don't. There is a plurality of different ideas and viewpoints. And good Rawlsians that we are, we need to be able to account for a significant and reasonable plurality in viewpoints. But of course, that does not mean that every reaction to art is equal, and that all you need is to just look inside your heart and speak from however you're initially feeling. The best art criticism is based on not grandiose, lofty, Platonic, Cartesian, objective reason, but on taking a step back, evaluating what you really feel about a work of art, what impression left on you, and why. By what principles does this really work for you? On what grounds do the stakes of the work, do the relationships, do the overall character dynamics and structure of the plot work or not work? And I do think that to be able to ascertain your stance on where a work falls vis-a-vis these questions, you need to be able to take a step back after all the initial excitement and energy wears off and think about how you really feel and why. Whether it is about this really fascinating finale to Amphibia or any other work of art, we should be able to explain why we believe what we believe and think about the questions the work leaves us with, and this is what I intend to do. Amphibia, in one sense, gives us pretty clear indicators of what happens to all of these characters after the events of the show. For the characters in Amphibia, who we see a couple years after the events of Anne and company coming there, leading up to the final defeat of Andrias, we see that Sprig and Polly have grown up. We see that Hop Pop has finally gotten with Sylvia. I will momentarily note that I have seen multiple people talking about this finale as though it takes place 10 years after the last events we see in the show, just like the Earth finale. This is not the case. Sprig is not 21. He is not an adult. At least he wouldn't be considered an adult by our standards. Polly is not fully grown. Maddie's little sisters are still tadpoles. These characters are still kids, they're just a little bit older. That is a minor distinction, but an important one nonetheless, and so it is that I thought it was a necessary distinction to make. Sprig keeps Anne close to his heart. There is no danger of him forgetting her. He has a lot of lovely little pieces of memorabilia and paraphernalia all about Anne. While he is not controlled or dominated by her influence, he very much respects that influence and works off all the things that she was really there to teach him in order to become more bold, more thoughtful, and more willing to pursue his passions while taking into account the perspectives of other people. And he has become an explorer, which is right for his character. He never did seem like he would be happy just being on the family farm. He and Ivy love traveling around the world, having new experiences and seeing new things, new features of the land, new cities, new animals, new topics of interest to note down. And they're taking their adventures to new heights. Ivy says that she has heard word of a newly discovered continent, and there's no one there. So she and Sprig are going to really be groundbreaking explorers and see what's over there and make notes of it. And I think that's a proper ending for Sprig. I don't mind that he and Anne aren't going to see each other again. That's heartbreaking, but it's the right kind of heartbreaking. The kind that is intended by the show, and the kind that is brutal and not entirely pleasant, but the kind that does not destroy these characters and leaves them with memories of each other that they can use to build their own identities for themselves. And certainly remembers Sprig as demonstrated by her job as a herpetologist and her adoration for the kinds of frogs that inspired the planters, one of which she even named Sprig. As for the rest of our Wardwoodians, no one has a particularly unexpected ending. Though I do really wonder how Bessie the snail and Joe Sparrow got together and somehow made a ludicrous but honestly quite charming snail-bird hybrid kid. I love this show. Weird as it is. Maddie is selling potions for the good of the community. We see Toady having become the new mayor of Wardwood with the help of his former boss, the mayor, Toadstool. And we see that Andrias has found peace in what is an unexpected but quite appropriate and apt ending for him. Andrias is the one character whose story in the last couple episodes I don't think could have been handled any better in any way. He has realized that he has neglected his kingdom and neglected the ideal set out by his younger self and his childhood friends. He has missed the opportunity to be a thoughtful, reformist king leading his people into the future, instead retreating into bitterness and resentment, and clinging to his father's expectations for him to conquer and vanquish all his foes. It's too late for him to be the king he once could have been, but it's not too late for him to contemplate his actions, try to repent, and keep close to the memories of his friends. We see he has a little leaf from Leaf. We see he has Barrel's warhammer. And we see him committed to planting, to the rebirth of the land he once ruthlessly destroyed and scorched and turned into a blighted industrial wasteland. He's a hermit. He has no honor or glory, but he's quite happy with that. And I am happy with that ending for him, too. I'm also happy for Olivia and Yunnan, who are a couple and seem to have some significant role along with Grime in whatever political system this world now has. Now that Andrias is gone, I don't think there's another king. Now, perhaps this is a little over-optimistic of an ending. It's a bit of a utopian dream. But it's a fitting, peaceful ending for the people of Newtopia and Amphibia as a whole. It's the ending I would have wanted for all of them. Now, I have a few more conflicted feelings about the Earth section of the epilogue, and my mind and heart aren't entirely left satisfied by what happened here. Now, first off, the Battle of LA being thought of as a hoax by a large, or at least significant, contingent of the people of this world, as demonstrated by the news anchor, just goes to show that these people are really so sucked into their own personal happenings that they have no real awareness of the world outside them, as was demonstrated by how little interest anyone took in Marcy or Sasha after they disappeared. Now, the chosen careers of the trio are fine. I have no problems with those, as I've said in my previous video on Amphibia's finale. These are not perhaps the careers that we would have all wanted for these characters, but I definitely think that these are all the careers they would have wanted for themselves, and could have become a famous, prestigious celebrity, and booked all the TV show appearances that she wanted, and yet she shunned the spotlight and dedicated herself to frogs. Marcy could have become a brilliant, prominent scientist, showered in prizes, most likely, and yet she chose to pursue her passion for comics, especially fantasy comics. I appreciate that. Sasha could have used her charisma and cunning to become a successful lawyer or politician, and yet she chose to really help kids who were troubled like she was. I respect that as well. And I have to say that I do not innately object to the finale separating all of them, and implying that they did not really keep in touch as much as we would have wanted them to. Even Sasha and Marcy reuniting don't seem to know all that much about what the other has been up to. They know some basic outlines, but not much more than that. We get outright confirmation that Sasha and Anne kind of drifted apart. This is a fine ending, and I like that they come back together and perhaps renew their friendship going forward. But it's an ending for a different show, I think. So much of this show has been about the three of them who have been separated trying to repair and rebuild their friendship. So ending the show with them kind of drifting apart, while it is a thoughtful and mature ending, does not necessarily work for me for the show that we have been watching for the last couple years. And I especially have my complaints with the Marcy ending. I think that she deserved more screen time and more earnest analysis of her psychological state. I always suspected that Marcy harbored a greater level of bitterness and resentment toward her parents, besides just being a little upset that they're making her move away from her childhood friends. But even if that move is all there is in terms of what's troubling Marcy, even if there's no deeper sense of malaise or discontent, it was still enough to make her run off, take all her friends to a fantasy world, and then have, as far as we know, absolutely no thoughts about ever coming back. And yet, all Marcy's discontent, all her doubt, all her anxiety about returning to Earth is swept under the rug in favor of plots in these last two episodes where she says, "Oh, how selfish I was for taking all my friends to Amphibia," and then just going ahead and returning to Earth. Marcy going back to Earth, even if they were going to go that route, which I didn't think was a good idea, should at least have merited a lot more conversation and a lot more nuanced discussion of her actual feelings and perspectives than we got. Still, I love the reunion of these people, and I hope that there are still more exciting adventures ahead for them. So anyway, thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Rewatch Amphibia. It's a great show. What did you think of this ending? What did you think about Marcy? Am I the only one who really wants to see a sequel series that's just the three of them in their 20s, just trying to navigate the difficulties of their lives and the loving but probably also a little tense bond between them, and perhaps maybe stumbling back to a fantasy world, who knows. But anyway, tune in soon for next analysis. It will be coming soon, promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.